spending time with the family and friends, and much like what we do here today, without, of course, the mask. Take the mask out. I was about 8 years old. Well, 8 years old, yeah. When I was, okay, and our life was about going to school, playing with other children, both Jewish and not Jewish, and just spending time with the family as well. On March 25th, 1940, Mussolini asked the Greek government to establish a base in Greece, and the Prime Minister of Greece, Metaxas, answered with a back then famous answer, no. On August 15th of the same year, an Italian submarine torpedoed a Greek battleship, and the war between Greece and Italy started. I was not going to be a usual war between one state or another, but looked like to be a particular global war at the end. Greece was defeating Italy, and that's when Germany stepped in with a mighty war machine invading Greece. Hunger, terror, and atrocities stole our peaceful world. Our home was close to the German barracks, and there was hardly a day that we did not wake up to the sound of a machine gun killing people. To transport the people to the cemeteries, the dead people, there was a truck with hay where they were loading the bodies, and there was a truck.
Fire truck.
No, there was a guard truck in front of it, and there was another guard truck behind it. And behind those three, there was a fireplace coming, washing the blood that was dripping on the street. But in order to go to the cemetery, they had to come by our home, by the street of our home, and we could see it. Well, as children, I was kind of curious. And when I heard the noise of the trucks, then I opened up the shutters a little bit to watch what was going on. But one day, right above our home, looked like there was a young fellow that was not dead. And he jumped off the truck. Well, the guard behind it stopped it. They killed him right there and then, and they threw him back on the truck, and they drove away just like nothing ever happened. Something like this, to the eye of a child, was devastating. Of course, hunger was widespread, since the Germans were confiscating just about everything that they could get, because they depending on the locals to get food for the troops. The fear was so widespread that when some people were going to a cafe or to a restaurant, they were trying to get as far back from the front door as possible, because at any time, for whatever reason, for no reason at all, the Germans might come and block the place and start picking up people, of course, from the very first, from the very beginning, and either as hostages or people that they were going to eventually get killed. The Great Resistance, my father spoke 7 different languages. German and Italian were 2 of them. So the underground, actually the resistance, that had connection with my father, and they knew about the language that my father spoke, so they will ask my father to go as an interpreter to see what was going on when they were interrogating the hostages. Well,
Well, hold on. Let me add one more thing. So the resistance movement, there were actually three sections. There was a section that was the people that would fight, the warriors, the fighters. There were the people that would be moving others underneath lines, war lines. And then there would be the people that were passing information. Not many of these people were Jewish. So you have to understand, in Greece, we're talking about Greek Orthodox. So the Orthodox, like Catholics and Orthodox religions, all Christians. And there were a few Muslims, but there weren't a whole lot of Jewish people that were helping the Jews in the underground resistance movement here.
okay. Now that we introduced the resistance, let me try to explain how they affected my life. As children, we used to play soccer, and in a square nearby, there was a mosque left there by the Ottoman Empire that occupied Greece for about 400 years until 1821. And there was a big square in front of the mosque, and we used to go there, play soccer. Of course, then, parents would not spend money to buy us an actual soccer ball. So what we used to do, we used to try to find an old sock and stuff it with paper and rugs and everything we could get, and then turn around and bind it with a twine and make a ball out of it. And that's what we used to use. In front of the mosque, the Germans have converted it into a munition depot. And there was a guard in front of it. So one day, while we were playing, there were a couple of people that came in and gave us a ball. There was not an actual soccer ball, but there was a ball, a small ball that we did not have. There was a catch to that, though. They asked us to try to kick the ball to the guard as often as we could, which, of course, in the beginning, it looked like it was a game. We kick it to him, he kicks it back to us, and we played and we kicked it back to him. But one time, actually the last time, when we kicked the ball to him, he took the bayonet out and busted our balls. So we started yelling at him and calling him names and jeering him. Finally, he got tired of it, and we saw that he was taking off his gun with cutter. He followed me. The place was not, the streets were not too far away from the square where we were playing. So I ran to the street and I turned around. He followed me there and he fired the gun just as I was turning the corner. And thank God I have already took the corner and it missed me. However, there was a young kid that was crossing the street at that time and he took the bullet and they killed him. Why the guard, that was the whole idea, why the guard was chasing us. The underground took the time to throw in the depot a couple of hand grenades. We didn't do much damage over there, but along with another incident, the Germans picked up 110 people. They took it to a hill and they shot him dead. They left him there. Today, the monument is there under.
So let me show you a picture. The mosque is still there. So that's the mosque at the top there in the middle. And this is how old we're talking about that my dad was. That's his school picture. So he was probably about 8 or 9 years old.
ghettos in Greece. The Venetians that they occupied Greece, they have made ghettos for the Jews. The Turks had done the same thing. But at that time there, we have no ghettos whatsoever. So the Germans building about 4,500 ghettos, 1,150 of them were Jewish ghettos, 900 concentration camps, 1,200 were camps for numerous purposes throughout Europe, including, of course, the death camp, gas chambers, and within the camps. After the fall of Italy, the Germans decided to apply their program of the so-called final solution to the Jews in Greece, starting from the northern Greek cities first. My father was in Athens at that time there, and he heard of the news was spread very quickly. So he dropped whatever he had and came to town. We had to make a decision.
So hold on, one more thing. Don't forget, my grandfather spoke 7 languages, so he was able to listen on the BBC radio to hear what was going on in the rest of the country in English, in French, in Italian, in German. So he heard all this. Now, my dad can't speak these languages when he's this young, so it was just a matter of feeding off of the stress level, I guess, in the house, which my grandparents always made everything just seem so easy. So my grandfather was the one that found out that the Germans were coming and picking up Jews, and they had to make a decision of what to do next.
Well, so we had, when I say we had to make a decision, that means my parents had to make a decision. Either we had to become passive and die, or we had to evolve and become a short-lived hero, or try to survive in order to become witness of the genocide and serve and preserve it for history and educate future generations. Immediately, my father contacted the underground and made arrangements for us to go into hiding. In the meantime, the Bishop of Greece have Damaskinos, his name was Damaskinos, has sent a letter to Hitler that we do not recognize Jews and Christians in Greece. As far as we're concerned, we're all Greek citizens. Of course, he never got an answer and never made any difference to him. We had he also, but the Archbishop of Greece in Athens, he instructed the clergy and everybody else to whatever they could do to help the Jews in Greece. Arrangements were made for all of us, my parents, my younger brother, and myself, to go into hiding. Not knowing the duration of the exile or whether we would come out of it alive or not, my mother took some beddings, pillows, some silverware, and a couple of pots and pans. She made a bundle, and the next day when the underground people came to pick us up with a horse-driven cart, we were ready to go and face whatever destiny the Lord had desired for us.
Okay, so this is a picture of my grandparents. That's on their wedding day. So that's my dad's mom and dad. And then once they got their new IDs, that's my grandfather, and that one's my grandmother. And their names went from being Cohen to Athanasopoulos. So my dad went from being Jack Cohen to Anthony Athanasopoulos.
Okay, first we were taken to a village nearby called Vasiliko. and put with a family of 4 who gave us a room and fed us for a few days. Germans would travel west from Khalkis or through the village, which made it very dangerous for us and for the people who harbored us. If the Germans could find out about it, they would have killed those people immediately. They would have taken us away, of course, and their home would be burned automatically.
Hold on, let me stop again. This is the family that they stayed with in the town called Vasiliko. And I don't know if you can see it very well, but this right here is my dad, and he's kind of smiling. And this right here is my grandmother, his mother, who looks very distraught. But I think one of the reasons why they stayed so strong with each other is because, as in other stories that you hear, they were separated. Men were separated from the women, parents were separated from their children. And in this case, even though there were separations, I'm trying to find another picture I have. They did have people in Greece that were separated. Here's a historical photo from a museum. So you can see there are a lot of women here who have bags with them and they don't really know what's coming next. So one of the strengths is that they all got to stay together. My dad's family got to stay together. Now this is a picture of Haidari. It's the holding camp that was in Athens. So from here, most people ended up at the death camp. But that's not my dad's story, so I'll let him continue.
Some people from the underground came and rode out belonging to a mule, and we started walking up a rocky hill, up the hill, without a road, without even a path, but by the direction that only those people knew. And finally, after about 3.5 hours of walking, we arrived in a plateau where there was only one monastery called St. George. With the exception of the monastery, the couple that was the keepers of the monastery, a man and a wife, there was not a soul around for near civilization for about 3.5 hours.
Hold on, let me share those pictures too, because a lot of the times when he talks about walking up the mountains, you don't realize that that's the mountain he's talking about. And so here's a picture of the monastery. This right here is where the 110 people were shot, and the story that he told you earlier about the mosque. And that is the picture of the monastery with my mom and dad next to it. So it was a very small building, and I'll let him tell you what it was like inside.
When was that taken?
Well, this was taken when I was a baby, because that's me right there.
There were rooms in a monastery. The monastery keeper was having one room, and they gave us another one, similar to theirs. The room was unfurnished. The floor was clay. Like I said, there was no furniture. There was no window, and had no running water, no bathrooms, no electricity, and of course, no telephone. The question of survival came up right away. What do we do for food? There was nothing, nowhere there nearby. Keep us feeding all the time. Those people have 12 children, but the children were in a nearby village, and they were coming there every now and then to bring supply for their parents. but just for the parents. So those parents did not have enough food to go around because when they depleted, there was nowhere for them to get food. So they could not help us with the food. However, they gave us some. The husband showed me how to go around and find edible mushrooms. Now, when I say edible mushrooms, there was not one single place where you could find and pick them up. Then I had to go around and walk around the mountains and try to find the mushrooms. My mother would take them, boil them, and mash them, and make a patty out of it, put it on the fireplace, and make patty, and that one of the food that we had. The lady of the monastery, of the keeper, she showed my mother that there were plenty of greens around the surroundings. So my mother would go and pick up something like a dandelion, and she boiled them and make a salad out of it. But we could not possibly sustain ourselves with food like this. We have to do something else. But the question was, what? Until one day, lo and behold, when I was roaming the mountains, I saw smoke nearby. So as far as I was concerned, there was nobody to be around there. And I just sneaked around, hid myself to a bush, and I saw a man had built something like a big igloo, and the smoke was coming out of that. The man was sitting down and seemed to be peaceful. So I approached the man and asked him what he was doing. He said he was making charcoal. I said, how in the world do you make charcoal like that? He said, you come by a few days later, I don't remember, and I'll show you how to do it. And sure enough, I kept on roaming that place over and over until one day he showed up. And he actually showed me how he could build the igloo and make charcoal out of it. So I went to the monastery and tried to talk to my parents because I could not possibly do it by myself. I had to have the help of my father. My father was kind of reluctant to begin with, but ultimately, he kind of agreed with me. And to start with, he asked me to try to make a small one to see if it works. Sure enough, we tried it, and lo and behold, here it is, we have charcoal. So we started building a big one, and when we made the charcoal, my parents would put in a sack and take it to the nearby village, make sure that there were no Germans in there, or they not expected any, and try to find a place where they could trade it for whatever they could get. A little bit of oil, mainly some flour, and whatever else they could possibly get. Oh, and once in a great while, they might just trade it for chicken.
So let me stop him real quick because I know we have some adults on the call. So if you could think about what it would be like if you were in hiding or you were fearful of what was going to happen in your life. And honestly, I don't always like to be bringing politics into it, but you have to think of how you can relate in present day terms. So if you think of sitting in your house and all of a sudden, let's say there's a riot or there's some kind of big commotion nearby and there's people running around that are being destructive, and you fear that you don't want to go outside, you don't want to go anywhere, you're just fearful. And then all of a sudden your son decides he's going to run across the street so that he can play with the neighbor. And you have no idea if he's going to get caught up in what's ever going on outside. Or imagine how you would act in today's terms in order to relate to what happened then. So here's my grandparents sitting in a monastery, desperately trying to live day by day, not knowing who's in the mountains, who's out in the woods. And all of a sudden, this young boy of theirs comes home and said, hey, I ran into somebody on the side of the mountain, and he showed me how to, well, you don't know if this kid is going to go back and tell the Germans that there's a couple of strange people in the mountains, and then they're going to be coming up to kill you. So I can't even imagine what my grandparents must have gone through with these young kids that thought this was just sort of almost like a game, because they were just all comfortable because the family was together, and they felt like naive to be able to go out and do these things. But if he didn't, they wouldn't be able to survive for the whole 2 years that they hid out in this monastery.
My turn. The days were long and passing day after day, until one day we heard the bad news. The Germans had picked up my grandmother, my mother's mother, and the two children, my two uncles that were with her. They have fled the country and go to the Middle East. So my parents discussed the situation, and they were fear that we were still in danger. The Germans could come up there at any time without any notice or anything, and what we could have possibly do. So they decided that we try to go to the Middle East. The way they were going to the Middle East was the underground would pick you up, take you to a secluded cove where there was a small fishing boat, and during the night they crossed to the island of Cyprus. From there they go to Turkey, and from Turkey they would go to the back then Palestine. So in order to do that, we have to get in contact with the underground headquarters to make arrangement for it. So one morning, at the crack of the dawn, my father and I would start walking. Again, there were no roads, there were no paths. We just had to go by direction of the place where we knew where the underground headquarters was. Well, we walked, and we had a piece of bread in a sack and a handful of olives and some water. We came, it was about right afternoon, I guess, when the sun was coming down. We came across a river. The river was strong, and there were boulders on the river. So we tried to find a bridge to cross it. We went up and down, and we couldn't find anything. To swim across was totally out of the question because the river was strong. And we were in a dilemma. What do we do now? How we cross the river? All of a sudden, out of the clear blue sky, there were two men that came up. I didn't know where they came from, but they came. So they asked the question, what are you guys doing here? My father said, we tried to cross the river to visit some relatives across. And we cannot find a bridge. He said, there's no bridge here. Come with us and we'll show you how. So he took us a little bit up the river, and there were 3 logs that were spanning the river. One of them, the one in the middle, was kind of saggy. They put me in the middle, and one of them in front of me, the other behind me. We walked on the middle log, holding the side logs until we crossed the river. Then they came back and crossed my father. So I don't know how that came up, but oh yeah. And finally, once we crossed the river, we went on and we got to a town called Steny, where they have the underground headquarters. And we got in touch with the underground. My father talked to them, and they made the arrangement, and they told us to go back home and, to the village, to the monastery, and they will notify us when they think that they can make arrangement. Sure enough, days passed, 2-3 weeks later, a couple of the underground people came. Now, don't forget, at that time there is winter, the middle of the winter, that came to pick us up. During the night, in a way fortunately, in a way unfortunately, during the night, there was a big storm, a snowstorm, and the mountains were covered with snow when we woke up in the morning. There was no way that the mule could cross the mountains to go to the cove. So they said that they would make other arrangements later on and let us know again. The reason I say in a way was fortunate and one unfortunate. For us at the time there was very unfortunate because we were ready to go. But on the other hand, a few days later, the same people from the underground came and said that the boat we were supposed to have taken were intercepted by a German patrol and were blown in the middle of the sea. So there were a lot of rumors going around, and we really did not know what to believe. Now, so one of the rumors were that an attempt was made for Hitler's life. So we discarded that, but nevertheless came out to be truth. So if that was the truth, we were saved by the snow.
So we've come to know a lot of faithful people of all different kind of religions. And again, I don't want to bring specific politics or religion into this, but again, you should think about your own situations, and I call them aha moments, where something happens and you realize it could have gone so differently. And nobody has a reason to say who or why some people survived and some people didn't. But throughout his stories and all the many stories that he has, like the one with at the mosque, that guy totally was right about to kill my dad before that other little boy caught the bullet. The being in the village, being the man that was on the side of the mountain that taught him how to make charcoal. Where did he come from? There was nothing else on the mountain. Where did these two men come from on the river to help him across the bridge?
At that particular moment.
At that moment, there were too many moments where you can almost see that it had to have been something otherworldly, some kind of hand of God that was keeping this family together. And that is one of the main things that I feel like got them all through it, is my grandparents' faith and their strength in God and in staying together.
No, we're. Oh. Okay. Well, after that, we decided to stay there, to risk it, and whatever comes, it comes. Shortly before the war ended, just about at the end of about 2 years, the underground came by there, and told us that to be ready because there are rumors that the Germans were going to come the island and they want to take us back to the village, which they did. One night they came and we went somewhere through the German lines and back to the village where we started, and with the same people over there. Where okay.
Until one day
we stay in the village until we stay with those people until one day we heard the bell, the church bell, ringing like never heard before. And we went out and see what was going on. And there were people screaming and dancing and singing. And we found out that we were finally liberated. So a few days later, we loaded our belongings to a cart and we went back home.
Okay, well, hold on. Let me add in here.
Yeah,
So we talked to different age groups, and we talked to different backgrounds of people when we do this event. So this is when I always do a back and forth and start asking questions. But again, just think of it in your mind. So the home where my dad's family lived before the war, they were, I would say, upper middle class. My grandfather was a business owner. He owned a chemistry company where he would, he had a cosmetics business where he would make cosmetics and he had all these chemicals that he would make this stuff with. So he had a lot of people in the neighborhood, a lot of people on the island that knew them. So one of the questions that everybody always gives us is, how did you go to another village if you were so well known in this village and nobody knew who you were there? Well, that's also why they had to move to the mountaintop, because everybody was afraid that people would get the idea of who is this family that's moving in. So then when they go to the mountain for 2 years and they come back home, you got to remember the only thing they could take was a bag full of whatever they thought they might need for what, a weekend, maybe a week or two. They didn't know they were going to be gone for 2 years. So when I discuss this with kids in school, I try to think about your next door neighbor. All of a sudden their grass starts growing and nobody's there to cut the grass. And you think, maybe they're out of town. Maybe they're on a week vacation. Well, then a couple weeks later, it's a real jungle over there and your house is going downhill. You realize that your property is right next to a junkyard. And then all of a sudden, somebody cleans it up. You see new people coming and going. Oh, well, maybe they rented it. And then a few more months comes by. These kids are going to the same school my kids are going to. They're friends. They must have just bought the house. 2 years go by. Your kids are on the same basketball team. Your pets are barking back and forth at the backyard. And then all of a sudden, this family comes to the door and knocks on the door, and they say, "You're in my house." So what do you think would happen today? And of course, most of the kids, and I'm sure most of you would think, I'm sorry, you're out of luck, go to a hotel until you can figure out somewhere else to go. But this family, is it 7? There was a family of 7, and my dad's family of 4 all lived together for almost a year until the other family found another place to go. So the humanity that they got to experience during this time is really, really tough for us to imagine. I'm sure we could do it for a weekend or a week, but after a while, you want to tell them about your story, about your joke?
Now, back in Greece, you may say, well, why those people could just go ahead and rent an apartment and move there? There wasn't such a thing there. You had to find a home, and the homes were not that easy to find. So we all had to bide our time and live together until they did finally found a home. Now, like I said, like my daughter said, there were 7 of them and 4 of us. There are 11 people. Our home was not that big. There was a two-bedroom home, a dining room, living room combination. There was a kitchen, a bathroom, and there was a washroom. That's all there was to it. So we had to live together. We had one bedroom for four of us. My parents would sleep on the bed, we sleep on the floor, get the bedding on the floor and sleep there. And so did they. Now in the morning, now there were two of us, two children that had to go to school, and two of the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3 of their children that they had to go to Greece, to school. So that reminded me of the joke of our famous Bob Hope. Bob Hope was asked one time about his childhood living. He said he was born in a large family, and the way he learned how to dance was waiting to go to the bathroom. And so did we. There were all these people in the morning that they had to go to the bathroom, they had to go to work, they had to go to school. The women were already trying to feed everybody else. It was actually it was pandemonium, really, but thank God we did get along together, and we made it for all this time until they left, and we took our life back.
So you can imagine taking your life back from something like that after 2 years of being gone, and so much uncertainty in your government. And again, I say, let's relate to what we have today, no matter what side you're on. I unfortunately didn't know my grandfather long enough to ask the questions. And I was too young to even know what questions to ask my grandmother. But this is the point where I tell as many people as possible that are young and still have parents and grandparents and even maybe great-grandparents, that the stories that they lived through are the ones that we're reading in our history books and the things that we're reliving today. So to fast forward, my dad went ahead and finished his schooling. They had to, so if he was in 5th grade, he was either in 5th grade or 4th grade.
1, 2, 3, 4, the 4th grade.
4th grade. So during the 4th grade, when he had his 4th grade midterms, he was also taking his 2nd grade end of...
There were no midterms.
I know that, but you got to relate to today. When you're taking midterms in 4th grade, he's also taking his final exam in 2nd grade. When he was taking his final exams in 4th grade, he was also taking his final exams in 3rd grade so that he could move with the rest of the class as he was in 5th grade. So he continued and he stayed on track. After high school, he went to the University of Padova in Italy. He studied chemistry. He got a doctorate in chemistry, and he was planning on following his father's footsteps. But the last year, his father called him and said, we're going to America. And this is where I say I'm not really sure exactly what happened, but I can only imagine government unrest and unsurety of what happens. This is a business owner who really wasn't sure what was going to happen. He had to establish his business again, be able to go back to Athens and get loans for whatever he may need. And also probably the fear of if this would happen again, since a lot of the Jews in the city, were moving. $21, and in order to have a sponsor in America, it would be his mother, his father, and his brother through one sponsor. And since he's over 18, he would have to find his own sponsor. So it's not like my dad, after all this time, to separate the family. So they were able to find 2 sponsors who would sponsor the whole family of 4 in Memphis, Tennessee. So that's how they ended up from Greece to Memphis. And once they got there, the Jewish corporation was able to help them with jobs. My dad was able to go and go back to Memphis State and learn English, and he got involved with the community. And so long story short, he went to a dance where he met my mom and asked her for a dance, but my mom wouldn't give her phone number. And my father ended up getting married. They had a son. They got divorced. And 20 years after that, somebody set my mom and my dad up on a blind date. And of course, he remembered her. She didn't remember him because he was Greek and he had a pencil thin mustache. They ended up getting married. They had me. My dad built a printing company, and he had it for my whole life, and then retired. And that's kind of where we are. So I'm going to say one small thing, and I'll let my dad wrap it up if you guys have any questions. There's a lot of things that I didn't realize growing up, like my grandmother would take me in the backyard and we would pull dandelions, just like somebody would go in the backyard and pull something from the garden. And I never understood why I was doing that. I never understood why everybody else went to the grocery store to get kale or, greens, and I'm pulling weeds. For Sabbath, every Friday, as Jews, we light a candle. And when we light the candle to represent the welcoming of the Sabbath, we have a candlestick. And I thought, well, we got money. I don't understand why we all can't just have candlesticks or give my grandmother a candlestick. But every Friday, since I was a baby, she would take a cup or a bowl with a little piece of cotton, and she would twist the cotton to make a wick with a little bit of oil, and that's how she would light her candle. Now, I didn't know this until, may she rest in peace, she had gone. That's what she did in the mountains. She would go out and she would get a little bit of the stuff that she could find on the tree or in the ground in order to make a wick and light a candle. So that was her way for her whole life to remember what she had been through and where she had come from. So a lot of people ask my dad how he had faith through this whole thing.
Well, in the middle of the night, watching that flinking light on my side of the house actually remind me of what I have lost: friends, school, play, and all this, and looking forward for a better day, for a liberation, and to get back to our normal life. But when you live here today, I'd like for you to think about the world that we live in today. The Holocaust is still a contemporary issue in that it demonstrates the atmosphere which genocides can take place. People still connect to prejudice, which are founded and illogical, and our society urges us to be tolerant. I believe there is a word of difference between tolerance and acceptance. I invite you to consider that we all have something to contribute to the world, and in accepting things as they are without carrying a judgment, we are able to treat people with dignity and respect. If you remember back in the beginning of the war, when the Germans started picking up people in Eastern Europe, the people were ready to give Jews away. While in Greece, people were stuck their neck out to save the Jews. The difference between acceptance and tolerance. In Eastern Europe, the Jews were accepted. As soon as they found a way to get rid of them, we gave them away. In Greece, we were accepted. We were Greek citizens, and the Greek citizens protected their Greek citizens. And that's the word of difference between acceptance and tolerance.
Thank you guys for letting us come and talk to to you today.
Thank you so much for being here, both of you. It's been such a wonderful experience to hear your story. Do we have time for questions? Do we feel up for that?
We're here. It's all up to you.
Okay, great. Does anyone have questions? Julia?
Okay.
Here, can you unmute your mic, Julia, real quick?
There we go. Thank you. This was wonderful. What year was it that, because I want to be sure that I've kind of got this in my head, that y'all went up to the monastery, and what year was it you came back to your home?
43 to 45.
Okay.
About September or October of 43, and we came back early the spring of 45.
Yeah, when it was over. Uh-huh. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody
I
else?
have a question, Julianne.
Sure, go ahead, Donna.
I have a question for you, Mr. Cohen. First of all, I want to say thank you for sharing your story with us. It's amazing to me, and I'm very inspired by your story. But I have a question because you were so young, as a young boy. Did you ever feel like your childhood was taken from you, or did you still have a childhood? I'm just interested in how you persevered and what your outlook was.
In a way, yes. In a way, we found out we were there. It was lonely. There were no other than my brother, my younger brother. There were no other children to play with. And of course, there were no schools to go to. So I was deprived for a while of my childhood. However, there was a country. There was nobody around, and we were able to roam around and play, make a slingshot, for instance, and shooting pine cones down, and that now, like I said before, the family had 12 children. There were a couple of them of our age, and every now and then they were coming to the monastery to see their parents, and we had a few hours together to play. So in a way, yes, I felt deprived, but on the other hand, we did have some relations with other children.
You also have to remember it was very different than other people's experiences who were separated from their parents. I think there's a sense of there's a sense of ease when you're that young and you depend on your parents. If your parents are there, you can explore and you can be a little bit more open. When your parents aren't there, then you start having fears and you're scared of what might happen next. You don't have anything that's comfortable. So again, I think one of the main reasons that they were able to survive is that they were able to stay together as a family.
Thank you.
My son has a question, but I'll ask it for him because you might not be able to hear it. Is that okay? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is Daniel and Ashland. He was wondering how many kids were out playing ball with you just getting a picture in his head, how many when he slashed the ball and then started shooting.
Yeah, see, that's funny because these are the questions that I don't think to ask. So I like that you asked that question. How many kids were playing soccer with you at the mosque?
Oh, that would, depending on the day. And the time normally it had to be in the afternoon because even when the Germans occupied Greece, and it mainly our hometown was occupied by Italian as well, and they have taken our schools and a lot of places for themselves. So we had to find a place to go to school, like there were not material to make pastries. So the people have closed their shops. And we go over there to the store, they allow us over there to have a class. So even though we were occupied until 1943, where we left, we still have gone to school. I was going the first grade of high school.
And his school is still there. We went to go see it.
It had to be in the afternoon. And we just round up whatever people would, kids we could get to round up together. And we have two captains, one from each team. And they pick up, each one of them would pick up one of the kids for their team. And when we got the team together, they would start playing. Sometimes we'd not have but about 4 or 5 people to a team. Sometimes we have 8 or 10. So whatever, whoever of us was available, then we played.
That's pretty cool.
I forgot, I was gonna tell you guys one more statistic that's pretty awesome when you understand what happened in other cities. That in the island or in the city of Holocaust where my dad was born, before the war, there were 325 Jews living in Holocaust. After the war, 303 survived. So less than 20 people were killed because of the Christians in that community.
That's cool.
Well, the bishop of our town actually came and picked up all our secret words from the synagogue and kept it in the basement of his church. Because of that, I mean, knowing of the peril, what he was, the Germans put him on house arrest. And then they sent him to Athens. They kept him in house arrest in Athens until the end of the war, where he came back to our hometown, and they returned everything that they had taken. They returned back to our synagogue. In fact, our synagogue was the only one in the whole Europe that for almost 300 years, for almost 3,000 years, had uninterrupted services until, of course, the Holocaust.
And until this year, the first year, because of COVID, this guy can't go to say his prayers at the synagogue for the high holidays. Isn't that crazy? Since the Holocaust, he's been able to practice, and then this year happens. Do y'all have any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I have just a comment. And I'm just so thankful that I was able to see this, because I grew up and I had my best friend was a Jewish girl. But when you're young, you don't see the difference. And I remember when my kids were in college, I'm from Ohio, and I had always taught them about the Holocaust, and, it was real. And I remember he was at Ohio State taking a class, and he had a tenure professor, and he told those kids that the Holocaust never existed. And my son came home, he was probably 18 or 19, he's close to 40 now. And he said, Mom, he said, when he said that, all of us looked at each other like, are you crazy? It did exist. You have to acknowledge it and learn from it, not pretend like it didn't happen. So I'm just so thankful that you did this. And I think you really need to tell these kids it really happened, because, they want to gloss over it. And it was a horrible, horrible thing. And I'm just so thankful that you did this, because I think this generation, my grandkids are 11, and I know he's too young to understand that, but high school kids now need to realize this happened. It truly happened.
Yeah.
And it so easily could happen again.
Well, it actually did. So my dad was actually speaking at a school at Kingsbury here in Memphis, and there was a young boy who was here from Somalia because of the genocide there. He actually watched his entire family beheaded, and he wrote my dad a poem because he didn't think he would ever see someone this age who had
Mhm.
actually successfully made it through life and had children
Right.
does happen today. Whether
Right.
it's because of your politics, because of your faith, or
Exactly.
again, we all need to remember to just accept each other.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm just so thankful he was here because I feel like I'm paying tribute to my friend and her parents, how we grew up and we were the same, you know. And then for my son to come home and tell me they're teaching that, and I thought back, I remember my friend's grandmother having, now I know it was the tattoo on her arm, and I'm like, how can they be teaching this in college and expecting kids to, you know, forget but not teach them the truth? History, it's the truth. You can't erase history.
That's
I
why
feel like
asking questions and asking our relatives and our older people the respect of knowing that they lived through.
exactly. But I just want to thank you because I think kids of this age, you know, they're on their computer and the internet and all this other stuff. They don't have a clue sometimes, you know, and they really do not understand that this actually did happen. But I just want to thank you because now I get to go, you know, help them with their homework. But it was just awesome. And so thank you so much.
It's
Thank you.
inconceivable today with all this, even Germany have accepted, no, that people think that it never happened. Where are the 6 million people? Where was
Exa-
1.5
I know.
million children that they had lost? Well,
Well, that's what I'm saying. He was in college, Ohio State. I'm from Ohio, and he's listening, and all these other kids are listening to this professor who is a 10-year saying the Holocaust never happened. So even though they knew it to be, you know, that was not true, they had to answer the question, you're right, it never existed. So it's like they're brainwashing these kids and changing history, and I don't understand why.
well,
You know,
somebody
because
has,
it's part of history and you learn from that. You know, it's history. You can't change it. But he was just, I mean, he just came home and it just bothered him so much. I'll never forget that. I mean, that, like I said, that's almost 20 years ago, but that's what's happening in schools now. They're just like, oh, it never happened. Well, yes, it did. It truly did. You have no idea that it did. But anyways, I just wanted to tell you thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That-
I have to go now and pick the kids up, but you know, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
that reminds me, let me see. Go ahead.
It's
Remind
okay.
me of what happened one day after the war when we went to school. We had a brand new teacher on the classical Greek, and he opened up the book over there. He looked at the name. He said, "Isaac Cohen." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Are you Jewish?" I said, "Yes." Now there was a rumor that the Germans have gotten the fat from the Jews and made soap out of it.
Oh,
Whether it's truth or not, I don't know.
right.
But the teacher turned around and said, how come the Germans did not make soap out of you?
What a
The first
horrible thing to
time, I
say.
said, you'll find out. So when I went to my father's store after school, there was my uncle there. One of my uncles was there. He came back from Middle East. And I told him the story. He said, don't worry about it.
Right.
We never saw the teacher again.
Yeah.
The teacher came that one day and he disappeared just like he came back. I didn't know how my uncle handled it, but he managed to kick him out.
Right.
So
Right.
that's
I
something
understand it.
that down over there too.
Well, I just think it's awesome that you do this because kids nowadays, they learn, but they don't get it. You know, they really don't understand it's real. And I just want to thank you for that.
Thank
So,
you.
anyways, thank you so much. I've got to go now and pick them up from do their homework. But have a good day. Bless you.
Thank
You
you,
too.
thank you.
Are there
Are
any?
we way over our time?
Oh, y'all are doing just fine. Do we have any more questions last?
Yeah, you have any more questions? Oh, you're talking to them.
Yeah. We're still getting used to this whole Zoom thing.
I know. Yeah, Julia, go ahead. make sure to unmute that mic though.
Yeah. So if we want to get in touch with you, we could go through the library, couldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. She has my phone number,
Yes.
and my dad he's hard of hearing, so he welcomes emails. He is more than happy to email back and forth. So if you want to get with Juliana and let her, we'll share our emails.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you
feel
all so
free
much.
to call the library and we'll
Yeah.
get you all set up.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Cohen. I just truly am so
Well, thank you.
thankful for this
Wonderful.
experience. And
Thank
I'm
you for
so-
inviting us. We appreciate it.
Oh, it was
Thank you.
really a blessing. It was a
Thank
blessing.
you.
And thank everybody for listening to our story.
Mr. Cohen, thank you so much for your telling your history and your story. We really appreciate it.
Yes.
Well, I
Yes.
tell you what, let me say one more thing since I know we have some Black people on the call, African American people. A lot of kids, when we go to predominantly Black schools, don't realize that when he came to America after going through people condemning him for his faith, he had such dark skin and such curly hair that he would go downtown in Memphis and get put on the back of the bus because
Wow.
they didn't realize. So he had no idea of the racial issues that were happening here in the United States. So he had to be taught what the difference was in races here. It's just, there's so many stories. There's
Yeah.
just
We
stories.
really have much more in common than we are different.
Exactly, in so many different ways. Everybody is still the same inside.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
I'm so
Thank you all.
I'm so thankful that you shared your story, and I'm also thankful for the other 303 survivors from where you live. That's incredible that people got together to save them. So
There's a lot of
Thank-
humanity in this world. Let's all just remember that.
there is, and we just focus so much on the negative, but there's all good. So thanks for organizing this. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
You
you.
guys have a wonderful evening.
All right. Y'all take
Okay.
care.
You too.
All right.
Bye.
Good night,
All right, thank
everyone.
you so much.